Close your eyes and breathe in the scent of cinnamon and old paper. We are heading into Willows and Harpers, a place glowing with honey-colored light, where the crackle of a fire and soft churn of pages makes everything feel safe and sound. You're listening to The Winter Book Club. It's quiet out, so quiet I can almost hear the hush of falling snow. I'm wrapped in my favorite cashmere turtleneck, its softness a comforting contrast to the cold. My toque is pulled low over my ears, and my winter jacket is buttoned right up to the brim, sealing in every precious bit of warmth. With my mittened hands tucked deep in my pockets, I walk with my canvas tote slung over one shoulder, securely holding our book club's weekly read, The Winter Garden Letters. Old-fashioned lanterns cast warm golden pools across the snow-dusted sidewalks, their light catching the slow, lazy drift of flakes. Above me, twinkling Christmas lights spiral around tree trunks, and every rooftop glows with soft amber bulbs. Each storefront window I pass shines like a tiny hearth, spilling its cozy warmth onto the street. The air smells like cinnamon, ginger, and roasted chestnuts, layered with that faint sweetness of hot chocolate. It breathes like the Christmas season itself. With every step the snow gives beneath my boots, a soft, satisfying crunch that settles into the quiet rhythm of the winter night. I'm headed to the warmest spot in town, Willows and Harpers, the beloved family bookshop. It's the heart of our small community, passed down through generations of Harpers, and the perfect refuge for our weekly book club meeting. The bookshop is a sight for sore eyes, exactly the place I want to be on a snowy Tuesday night. Willows and Harpers stands at the corner, a beautiful, welcoming brick building covered in a thick, immaculate coat of fresh snow. It's glowing. Every window is trimmed with warm, honey-colored fairy lights that outline the roof line and eaves, turning the whole structure into a life-size, modern gingerbread house, dusted with icing. The lower floor boasts deep, wide picture windows, and through the glass I can see the flicker of a crackling fire in the stone hearth, the heart of the shop's reading nook, its orange glow pulsing softly against the dark wood shelves packed tight with books. But it's the upper level that always feels like home when you need a place away from home. A massive floor-to-ceiling glass wall wraps the corner of the building, forming an enormous lantern-like reading loft. Inside, the books climb up the walls, a dizzying landscape of color. I can just make out the silhouette of people curled into their seats on the plush wooden benches, bathed in the intimate glow of small lamps scattered across tiny tables. If cozy had a name, it would be that loft in Willows and Harper's bookshop. A charming dark wooden sign hangs above the entrance in elegant lettering. Two small Christmas trees dusted with snow flank the doorway, their branches twinkling with delicate white lights. A simple pine wreath tied with red bows hangs centered on the heavy wooden door. And just to the side, a single lamppost stands watch, casting a warm, friendly halo over what would have been a cobblestone street, if not for the soft white blanket covering it tonight. Seeing it like this, quiet, perfect, wrapped in falling snow, makes the tension of the day melt from my shoulders. I quicken my pace, eager to push through the heavy door and step into the warmth of this little small town bookshop. I'm about 10 minutes early, just as planned. Inside, the sound of the heavy door closing behind me is instantly softened by the shop's deep quiet, broken only by the sweet high chime of the brass bell hanging above the frame. The air is immediately and wonderfully different. It's a perfect blend of the familiar, the dry, faint vanilla of old paper and fresh print, and the deep warmth of burning firewood, and the subtle hint of steamed milk and cocoa drifting from the cafe counter. A low, quiet jazz piece, smooth and entirely instrumental, floats from a hidden speaker in the corner, a gentle melodic hum that seems to encourage hushed voices. The shop isn't empty. A few dedicated bibliophiles are already settled in. A young woman is curled into a deep green armchair by the front window, lost in the pages of an oversized novel, while a silver-haired man browses the history section, turning pages with slow, reverent care. The whole space feels peacefully occupied, filled with the shared silence of people enjoying the same small sanctuary. But my gaze doesn't linger on them. Instead, it's drawn to a man standing just a few feet away, quietly flipping through the travel section. I know who he is, and apparently so does my heart, judging by the sudden flutter. A new face in the book club, and I'd be lying if I said I hadn't noticed him before. He's wearing a deep midnight blue coat, heavy wool, practical, warm, layered over a light gray sweater and a simple dark scarf. His dark hair, slightly longer on top, is ruffled in a way that suggests he ran a hand through it moments after coming in from the snow. I catch myself staring, a soft breath slipping out as my head tilts in an unconscious study. Before I suddenly remember, I'm standing in the middle of a bookshop, openly gawking at a man in the next aisle. I snap my attention away, fingers tightening around the strap of my tote until my knuckles pale. My gaze flicks around, searching for any sign that someone noticed my staring. Thankfully, everyone else is safely absorbed in their own books. "Ah, Riley," he says as I make my way over, his smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Always on time. He nods a warm welcome. That's my cue. I pull a neatly bound leather-covered journal, the bookshop's ledger, from my tote bag. Even though I handle all his actual accounting on my computer, I still maintain this handwritten version for him. For many in the older generation, the comfort of something tangible, something inked and real, means more than spreadsheets ever could, and he appreciates it deeply. "Everything's in order, Mr. Harper," I confirm, sliding the journal across the counter. "The books are balanced." "Thank you, my dear. Truly, I don't know what I would do without you." He closes the journal with a satisfied pat. It's a weekly ritual, one of several I keep for business owners around town. Running my little floral shop, Velvet and Vine, fills my days with beauty and blooms, but the bookkeeping work, which I do for a handful of local shops, either weekly or monthly, is what keeps the lights on. It's less creative, sure, but it's steady, comforting, and keeps me closely connected to the heartbeat of our community. With that predictable exchange, I head toward the fireplace, already lit and sending a wonderful steady heat into the room. The 8 armchairs are perfectly arranged for our book club meeting. None of the others has arrived yet. But as I take a step toward the hearth, I feel it, that subtle shift in the air. I look up and he's looking at me. His eyes find mine across the room, and I stop. They're a striking, unreadable shade, maybe dark green, maybe slate gray, softened by the warm indoor light. They hold me for just a fraction of a second. Just long enough for a small, slow smile to curve the edge of his mouth. It's genuine, warm, a smile that reaches his eyes, cutting through whatever quiet mystery I've been projecting onto him. And I feel giddy, ridiculously giddy, like a teenage schoolgirl, wondering if he was really looking at me. My heart gives a quick, foolish flutter, against my will. I manage a slight, hopefully casual nod in return before turning away and taking one of the chairs, pretending to rifle through my tote bag. I risk a quick glance back, just enough to see him start to walk in my direction. But before he reaches me, a few more book club members jingle through the door, shaking off snow, laughing, greeting one another. They drift to the hearth first, filling in the seats beside me. I smile, make small talk, ask how their week has been, doing my best to appear normal, composed. Oliver, yes, I did catch his name from the previous sessions, finally makes it over. The only chair left is the one directly across from me. I try to focus on the conversation beside me, but the corner of my eye keeps drifting, just to check. He takes his seat with a polite nod to the others, offering small smiles as everyone settles in. And then, there, a glance toward me. I return the look with a small, almost nervous, pressed lips smile. Before anything else can unfold, Elizabeth, our book club leader, stands and clears her throat. Instantly, the soft hum of the room settles, conversations hush, and the group shifts into quiet attention. We spent the next hour absorbed in the familiar ebb and flow of literary debate, but my focus kept fracturing. I couldn't help stealing glances across the circle toward Oliver, letting my attraction to him become more obvious to myself. At times I felt his gaze on me, but I was too scared to check if it was truly happening. Once, when I risked looking up as he finished a point, his eyes caught mine, and his mouth curved into that small, quiet smile. I couldn't read its meaning, but it sent a surge of heat through my chest and up beneath my cashmere turtleneck. I quickly dropped my gaze to my notes, stunned by my own reaction. Elizabeth stood again, her notebook tucked away. Wonderful discussion, everyone. Truly. Now for the exciting part. She lifted a slender volume with a deep blue and silver cover. Our holiday selection for next week is a sweeping romantic drama, a story about a promise made during the most whimsical part of the season, and the weight of what follows. We'll be reading The 12th Night Promise. Chairs scraped softly as everyone began packing up. I stood reaching for my coat when Oliver passed just behind me. He paused only for a second, but long enough for his voice to find me. Hey, that was a great point you made earlier about the letters. I looked up, surprised he'd singled me out in the bustle. Oh, thanks. I mean, the author's a remarkable writer. He nodded in agreement, and his eyes felt like they were searching mine as he responded. Yeah, I thought so too. Then came that smile, his warm, half-knowing smile that I realized in that moment he'd shared with me a few times tonight. The kind that settles in your chest and refuses to leave, no matter how small the moment. Before I could decide what to say next, I noticed two of the women from the book club watching us over the rims of their mugs, their eyes flicking between him and me with unmistakable curiosity. Heat rose in my cheeks immediately. I tried to ignore the attention, but became hyper-aware of the way Oliver wrapped his scarf around his neck, the subtle stiffness that told me he had noticed the staring too. He cleared his throat gently. I guess I'll see you next week. Yeah, I said, too quickly, too eagerly. See you next week. His faint smile deepened just a touch, like he'd heard the truth beneath my voice. He gave a small, certain nod before turning, buttoning his coat and offering polite goodnights to the still curious book club members. Then he stepped into the snowy night beyond the shop door. The following Tuesday felt like a soft repetition of the last. The same gentle hush in willows and harbors, the same sweet smell of vanilla drifting through the air, the same golden street lamp light spilling across the snowy sidewalks. Only the snowfall seemed faster this time, heavier, thicker, turning the whole town into a shaken snow globe. Tonight, Oliver was already seated by the hearth when I walked in, the firelight brushing warm highlights along the edges of his dark coat. He looked settled, peaceful, and too handsome for me to pretend I didn't notice. I handed Mr. Harper the accounting book, trying to appear composed, though my attention kept drifting back to the circle of chairs gathering near the flames. I hesitated. Should I go over there and try small talk, or slip quietly into my usual seat and pretend I wasn't hoping he'd look up? But the choice evaporated quickly. Another book club member spotted me and launched into a cheerful summary of her take on this week's read. Before I knew it, we were walking to the hearth together. By the time we reached the circle, most of the seats had already been claimed, including the one beside Oliver. Becca, a young woman who had joined the group a few months ago, had claimed it. She was striking, effortlessly put together, her long hair falling over her shoulder as she leaned in toward him. I watched her tilt her body just enough that their arms nearly touched. At one point, she scooted an inch closer, pretending to peer at a passage in his book. Oh, can you show me that part again? She asked, lightly brushing his forearm as she leaned in, her voice sweet enough to make her intention clear. Oliver obliged politely, turning the book slightly so she could read, though his expression stayed neutral. Distant, maybe. He nodded along when she spoke, offering small, courteous smiles, but his attention kept drifting back to the pages, almost as if he was using them as a shield. I lingered for a moment, pretending to scan the room for a seat while quietly trying to understand why the scene tugged at me more than it should have. Maybe it was because I'd thought about him all week. small, flirtatious moments imagined in the private corners of my mind. I wondered who he really was. A doctor, maybe, or someone in the trades. No, too clean for that. An accountant, perhaps. He carried that serious, deliberate air, like every quiet moment held its own intention. I barely knew Oliver, yet I felt a flicker of jealousy at the ease of their interaction. I settled into a seat a little further away, keeping my distance from both of them. Becca, perched beside him, seemed determined to close the gap. She leaned just slightly closer to peer at his book, her hand brushing the page as she murmured a comment. And Oliver, polite, attentive, shifted the book toward her. She laughed softly at her own observation, tossing her hair back as she glanced in my direction, her expression teasing, almost as if daring me to notice. I forced my attention away from them just as Elizabeth officially called the meeting to order. I flipped open my notebook, trying to look focused, even though my mind was still warm with the echo of Oliver's smile and possible intentions from last week. I told myself to settle, to stop noticing every small thing he did, every shift, every quiet glance, but it was harder than it should have been. Gradually, the room eased into its familiar cadence as the discussion circled around the central romantic conflict of the novel. And then came the question I'd been expecting, framed by Elizabeth's pointed gaze. Many people see Alistair's promise as romantic, a grand gesture made under the mistletoe, she began, scanning their circle. Riley, you've been quiet. What do you see as the fundamental difference between a vow and a simple promise in the context of this book? At the sound of my name, Oliver's head lifted, his eyes already waiting for me to speak. I straightened in my seat and offered a slightly vulnerable take, focusing on the theme and emotional core. A few people shrugged, but as I continued, I felt his focus deepen. His gaze settled more fully on me, leaning in, really listening, his eyes narrowing slightly, his expression intent in a way that sent a flutter low in my stomach. I became so aware of his attention that I almost lost my train of thought, glancing away for a moment just to steady myself before continuing. I actually think Riley's right. The author was definitely steering us that way. I glanced over at him, surprised. He gave a small, supportive nod. Becca, still leaning slightly closer to him, seemed to glare at me ever so subtly, her lips curved in a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. I felt a flicker of irritation towards her, and something more unexpected curling quietly in my chest as my eyes met his. The discussion continued to circle the romance, but then Oliver spoke, and even the room seemed to lean in. His voice was low and steady, a rich baritone with a natural, almost romantic cadence. Each word deliberate, yet flowing with a quiet, inherent rhythm that made even abstract ideas feel intimate. Regret in this context, he began, lifting a hand to the back of his neck, his fingers rubbing lightly beneath his hairline as he tilted his head in thought. Isn't about wishing you'd chosen differently. It's realizing you were never brave enough to truly choose at all. His hand slipped down to his jaw as he continued, almost absently. The protagonist isn't suffering from a mistake, just the cost of inaction. The insight hit immediately, resonating with something deep inside me. I felt the familiar flutter, intellect, and curiosity intertwining with something more, foolishly tender. But this time, my gaze drifted past him, catching Mrs. Gable and Janet. They weren't focused on Elizabeth or their notes. Their eyes were on Oliver, sparkling in a way that made it clear I wasn't alone in finding him compelling. The thought landed sharply. Others saw it too. As we packed our things at the end of the night, I accidentally dropped my pen. It rolled all the way to Oliver's foot. He immediately knelt to pick it up, glancing at the name printed along the side to see whose it was. Our eyes met, and I reached out with an awkward little gasp of a smile. Sorry, it just got away. No worries, he said, placing it in my hand, his fingers gently grazing mine, before he straightened and returned to packing his things. I stood there for a second longer than I meant to, wishing desperately that I could start a real conversation with him. But my nerves tangled around my words, holding them hostage. And before I could gather myself, Becca swooped in with effortless confidence, cutting between us as she gathered her coat. A moment later, she was walking out with him into the snowy evening, the door chiming softly behind them. I remained inside, feeling like I'd been left behind in my little bookshop snow globe. Quiet, enclosed, waiting for the next time Oliver might shake my world up again. Over the next couple of weeks, I found myself silently growing a profound admiration for Oliver. During discussions, I began noticing the subtle habits I found so attractive. He would jot quick notes in margins of his own worn copy of the book, his brows slightly furrowed as he listened to others. Sometimes he'd bite the tip of his pen, then pause and lift it from his mouth, lightly tapping his lower lip, while staring into the middle distance, clearly forming his next point. The gesture was so focused, so absent-mindedly thoughtful, and entirely captivating. He never seemed aware of the magnetic pull he carried, both in his quiet intellect and his calm, handsome presence. I wasn't sure if he noticed me beyond the circle. His smiles and glances felt deliberate, or maybe I just wanted them to be. And whenever there was the tiniest opening, some fleeting moment where his gaze lingered just a little too long, Becca always seemed to slip in, effortlessly engaging him and closing whatever window might have existed. But even with the distractions, I found myself drawn to his subtle mannerisms, the way he'd look up at the ceiling, momentarily breaking eye contact with the group as he considered someone's question, or the way his smile, small, genuine, would lift at the corners whenever he greeted someone. Even the way he listened, tilting his head slightly, dropping his gaze to his book with a kind of focused respect before offering his perspective. And when the fire grew too warm, he would push the sleeves of his heavy wool sweater up just above his forearms, revealing the strong, deliberate lines in his arms as he settled deeper into his chair. It wasn't intentional or cocky, just a quiet intensity that caught my attention every single time. Just before Christmas, The last formal meeting of the year gathered around tables pushed together, replacing the armchairs. The usual cocoa and coffee were swapped out for cinnamon tea and winter pastries. I slid into a chair, arranging my things, my fingers brushing over my notebook as I tried to seem busy. Slowly, the others trickled in, taking their usual spots around the circle. The room carried that familiar mingling of winter air and coffee, but beneath it was something else. Oliver's cologne, warm and subtle, drifting over to me as he settled into the seat beside me for the first time. As he took the seat beside me, the edge of his coat brushed my arm as he settled in. He pulled out his copy of the book, then his notebook and pen, arranging everything with a focus that didn't quite hide the way he kept flicking his gaze in my direction, like he was aware of me in his peripheral vision the entire time. Finally, once he settled, he turned fully toward me, shoulders angled, attention clear and deliberate as he cleared his throat softly, as though gathering his courage. "Hey," he said, his voice bright and warm. "How are you?" I blinked, caught off guard, and almost spluttered some of the tea I'd just sipped. "Good," I said, trying to sound casual. "And you?" He gave a small shrug, easy and unforced, then tilted his head as his eyes dipped briefly to my notebook. "And what did you think of the book this week?" he said with effortless charm, the quick glance downward followed by the slow, intentional lift of his eyes back to me. The flutter hit instantly. He was asking, really asking. I smiled, feeling a mix of calm and excitement settle in my chest. "I thought it was a good read. A bit dry at times, but still a good read. What about you?" His eyes were soft when they met mine, and for one suspended moment, I imagined him telling me he thought mine were beautiful, a quiet, perfect romantic confession made entirely in my head. The thought lingered, delicate and warm, until his voice broke through, pulling me gently back into the present. "It was interesting," he said. He nodded once, thoughtful. "I liked it, the quiet parts more than the big moments. It felt honest." There was something steady in the way he said it, like he wasn't trying to be insightful. He was simply telling the truth. Across the circle, I noticed Becca watching with a slight squint in her eyes, as if she were suspicious of me, and maybe a bit annoyed that somehow Oliver had swapped seats. I tried to redirect my attention to the room as Elizabeth called everyone to order, but Oliver's quiet presence lingered, settling into my thoughts like a warm thread I couldn't quite unravel. The discussion for the final book, The Woven Thread of Winter, started. I tried to listen to Elizabeth's prompts, but my attention kept fracturing under the weight of his presence so close beside me. During group discussions, Oliver always listened more than he talked. Sitting next to each other meant he whispered small comments back and forth in between conversations and bursts of laughter from the group. It felt like the start of a friendship, yet not quite that, because every time our eyes met, a small shiver ran through me. Not from the winter outside, but from that gentle, unmistakable excitement of a new crush. When the meeting concluded and everyone began gathering their heavy winter gear, he lingered. I could feel his hesitation as he stood beside me, tugging his dark gloves onto his hands, as if reluctant to let the night end. I really enjoyed tonight, he said softly, his voice low and deliberate. Talking with you, hearing your thoughts, it was nice. His eyes held mine for a beat longer, warm and sincere, like he wanted me to know he meant it. He finally straightened, slipping on his gloves with deliberate slowness. Good night, Riley, he added, his tone carrying something quiet and personal, not just polite. Becca tried to step in to walk out with him, but he glanced at his watch and offered a small excuse. Then, with a measured nod and one last glance at me, he exited the bookshop, leaving her standing awkwardly as the door chimed softly behind him. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I definitely felt something, a small spark maybe. I couldn't stop thinking about him choosing the seat beside me. I was amazed, confused too, but definitely on cloud 9. Now that the book club was on its winter break, there wouldn't be another meeting until next year. Still, Mr. Harper, kind as ever, offered extended hours in the shop's quiet upstairs lounge for anyone seeking a peaceful refuge, where they could settle by the crackling fire with a good book during the Christmas lull. It was cozy upstairs, a little warm than the main floor. Aisles of books to peruse, and a section of floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the streets below. Plush window benches lined the expanse of glass, the perfect place to sit, read, and watch the snow drift down. It felt almost like a living snow globe, safe, protected, and magically surrounded by winter's charm. The following Tuesday night rolled around, and I found myself missing book club, craving the calm, the comfort of familiar shelves, and the soft lamplight. And of course, thinking about Oliver. I couldn't stop replaying our last meeting in my head. Who am I kidding? Every interaction had been analyzed under a microscope through my very own rose-colored glasses. Every glance, every smile. Had any of it meant something? Or had I been imagining it all? Every small gesture seemed charged, a flicker of his eyes in my direction, the tilt of his head when I spoke, the polite attentiveness he showed, as if listening to more than just my words. But were they signals or just friendliness? The uncertainty tugged at me, a quiet tension beneath the flutter of attraction, leaving me torn between hope and skepticism. I made my way up the spiral staircase to the loft. A couple of patrons were already scattered among the shelves, one hunched over his laptop with headphones on, watching the snow drift outside, a woman flipping through the sale items shelf, cups and knickknacks tucked under her arm. I knew exactly where I was headed, the romance section, to see what holiday releases had arrived this week. I scanned the display, my gaze drifting over the titles. Snowflakes and Second Chances, A Very Merry Mistake, Cupid's Cozy Cottage. I reached for one, ready to read the back cover, when of course my thoughts slipped straight to Oliver, as they had all week, since the last book club meeting. I sighed under my breath and rolled my eyes at myself, lifting the book as if the printed words could save me from yet another spiral of daydreams about him. God, I needed to get a grip. But every time I tried to focus, he threaded his way back into my mind. His voice, his smile, the way he looked at me that night. I flipped the book over, determined to concentrate, even if it meant wrestling my own imagination into submission. Then I heard footsteps on the stairwell. I almost couldn't believe it. A spark of fate rushed through my mind. Could this be some sort of meant-to-be moment? Of all the people who might come here tonight, it was him, Oliver. His eyes found mine, and they lit up. He smiled and started walking toward me. I was frozen, a little embarrassed of just having thought of him. "Riley," he said low and warm. I didn't expect to see another book club member until after the holidays. "Yeah. How are you?" I asked quickly. "I'm great," he said, shrugging slightly. "I just needed a night at the bookshop, I guess. What are you doing?" A rare confidence crept over me. "I just wanted a break," I said out loud, honest but vague. "What do you have in your hand? The next good read?" he asked curiously. I felt my cheeks heat as I realized it was snowflakes and second chances. I should probably bring my cats here too, then the whole stereotype would be fulfilled. "Oh, it's nothing. Just browsing for a friend," I said, putting the book back on the shelf. He glanced at the title and chuckled softly. "Right," he said, sparing me the embarrassment. "Well, I just purchased a couple books and thought I'd enjoy the loft for a bit," he added. "Oh," I replied. "Yeah, go right ahead." I tried not to overthink it or sound awkward. "I should let you go. Enjoy your books. It was great seeing you, Oliver," I said, brushing off the conversation, my fingers threading into my hair, scratching the back of my ear, a nervous habit, as I looked to the floor, averting his eyes. I was just about to turn away when his hand moved instinctively and landed softly, lightly on my wrist. I froze. "Sorry," he said immediately, pulling his hand back almost before the word was out. "I didn't mean to startle you." His shoulders relaxed as he looked into my eyes. I didn't mean it that way. Actually, maybe I could grab us both a cup of hot cider from the cafe downstairs, if that's okay with you." Wow. He was asking me out. Was he asking me out? My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't form a single coherent thought. I was holding my breath, unintentionally, of course. My mind raced. Was this really happening? Had the moment I'd been imagining for weeks finally arrived? And then Oliver, every detail I found irresistible, unfolded before me. His dark hair just tousled enough to seem effortless, framed eyes that held me captive, deep, warm, magnetic. The faint shadow of stubble along his jaw added rugged charm, and the subtle scent of him, warm, clean, intoxicating, hit me as he leaned over, ever so slightly, closer. The curve of his lips as he smiled, the intensity in his gaze, the gentle gesture of his hand near mine, all of it pulled me in completely. My heart raced, fluttering and spinning in my chest. Desire, disbelief, exhilaration. They crashed through me, leaving me breathless. All I could do was nod, swallowing down the rush, utterly undone by him. Great. I'll just put my books down by the window, he said. That flirtatious smile clear and certain. He moved toward the empty bench, each step calm, confident, magnetic, and the faint brush of his warmth sent a shiver through me. I finally managed to speak. Yeah, I'll just wait for you to come back. My voice trailed off, caught between awe and disbelief as he stepped away. In that moment, I'd completely lost any sense of composure. He smiled once more before heading down the stairs, and I couldn't tear my eyes from him, my heart hammering in my chest. A few minutes later, he returned with 2 steaming cups of cider. I tried not to stare. The mug's warmth nearly matched the warmth in my chest. He set one before me, our fingers brushing lightly, then settled onto the bench beside me. We turned toward the window. Snow drifted lazily past the glass. The loft was quiet. Fire crackled softly. We just sat. Thank you, I murmured, lifting my cup. He smiled, that calm, easy smile that always seemed to make space for the world to settle around him. Of course, he said. It's nice, quiet up here. Perfect night for this. After a pause, he asked softly, So, why'd you join the book club? I blinked at him, surprised by the question. It was simple, direct, but somehow inviting. I guess I like being around books, people who care about them, I suppose. And I thought it would be a nice way to be part of something small in town, I said, my voice soft. He nodded thoughtfully, eyes on the falling snow, for a moment before returning to me. That makes sense, he said. I joined because, well, it's quiet, but also a way to meet people when you've just moved into town. Thought I'd try something different. That opened the door. I told him about running the floral shop, about taking on bookkeeping for the town, and he listened with quiet curiosity, asking gentle questions here and there. I learned he was a technical writer, and that in his spare time he photographed nature and travel scenes, his voice softening whenever he described a favorite place he'd captured, eyes distant for a moment, as if standing on a mountain peak. As the night progressed, we laughed lightly over small things, the stubborn icicle clinging to the ledge, a story about a particularly mischievous cat in my shop, and in between the conversation unfolded naturally, revealing tiny, intimate pieces of ourselves. Not the curated public-facing shelves from book club, but real, unguarded moments, a stray thought, a habitual gesture, a memory shared without pretense. Each one seemed to pull us closer, quietly, almost without notice. It felt slow and gentle, like unwrapping a gift you didn't want to tear open too quickly. By the time the snow had piled lightly outside and the cider was nearly gone, it was clear we both knew something subtle had shifted. Book club had given us a reason to know each other, but tonight we were learning who the other really was. The cafe owner, Mr. Harper's son, appeared at the bottom of the spiral staircase, clearing his throat gently. "Closing up in 10, folks," he called up with a friendly wave. The moment broke softly without urgency. Oliver simply nodded, standing to gather the empty cider mugs. I stood too, feeling a pleasant warmth radiating through me that had nothing to do with the warmth from the cider. He turned back to me, his smile calm and entirely focused. "This was much better than just reading alone," he said, holding the mugs in one hand. He reached out with the other, his fingers lightly brushing the tips of my coat sleeve. "I don't want to wait until the new year to see you again. Could I take you out for a real coffee sometime, away from the bookshelves?" "I would like that very much, Oliver," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. He chuckled softly, a sound that felt private just for me. "Great." We walked downstairs, the brass bell above the door chiming one last time for the night. Snow drifted softly around the golden lamppost outside, and he paused, just close enough that I felt the warmth radiating from him. "This might sound a bit old-fashioned," he said, his voice low and steady. "But could I walk you home?" His words held a quiet hope, the kind that made it clear neither of us wanted the snowy, cozy night to end just yet. As we stepped out onto the street, I pulled my toque lower and tucked my mittened hands deep into my pockets. I realized my heart wasn't fluttering foolishly anymore. It was beating a steady, warm rhythm. We turned the corner and walked toward the gentle amber glow of the Christmas light, the sound of our boots making that soft, satisfying crunch in the fresh snow. The air smelled of cinnamon and crisp, clean winter. The town was utterly quiet, still, and cradled safely in the snow. For the first time in weeks, everything felt perfectly complete as we strode together under the hush of falling snow.